We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melting into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Donna Hicks-Mitchell. She is a corporate discovery strategist, speaker, executive coach for leaders, and author. Donna, thank you so much for being here with us. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Absolutely. So thanks so much for having me. I am so excited to be here. It's been a long time coming and I can't wait to share. So my pronouns are she and her. And when I was a little girl, I always wanted to be a forest ranger. If you can imagine, a forest ranger. And I think because I've always had a love and a passion for nature and for animals. And so I really had my eye on being a forest ranger when I was little. And then I ended up on Wall Street. So go figure.
I love thinking about where we thought we would be 10, 20 years down the line. Fast forward to today and your experience on Wall Street in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and being an executive coach for leaders. How do you think your personal journey has really led you to found your own business and be at this part of your career?
Sure. Definitely. I think that my personal journey definitely directed me in this particular space because I've always been a defender of women. I can recall very early on in my career and actually in school, there were opportunities where I actually saw bullying taking place. And I couldn't take it. I couldn't take when someone was being treated unfairly. It's always something that I had to give voice to. And even though, I might have been the littlest or the smallest or the softest spoken person in the room, I always gave voice. And then I wanted to also find a way to give voice to others. So the example that I'll give that really has been quite pivotal in this decision was when I was actually in middle school and there was a little girl named Amber. And Amber was absolutely perfectly coiffed all of the time because her mom was a beauty pageant winner and she had always raised Amber to be the same. So there was not a hair out of place. I mean, beautiful fluffy curls every day. She couldn't change into gym clothes like we had because she had on like bodices and different things like that. And so she got teased a lot. But she was the sweetest spirit, but she got teased awfully. And I remember coming to her aid and saying, Amber, don't be afraid. I'll stand up for you. You might not have a voice or, you might not want to scream because it's not ladylike, but I'll scream for you. So I remember from that point on always being a defender of women. And so fast forward into the DE&I space, just making sure that inclusive environments are fair to all, giving voice, charting a path for others who may not know how to raise their voices, is something that I've always been passionate about. So it's quite a natural transition for me.
From a very early age, being an advocate, being a defender of women, and really about your part in creating an inclusive environment and a place where people feel like they belong.
Absolutely.
I have a lot of questions around your experience, insights, and advice, but I want to kick it off with a broad one as well in terms of if you had to select just one top of mind, what's the next problem or situation you're currently trying to solve?
Absolutely. What's really close to my heart is helping corporate executives and especially women of color to find balance. And we are looking at putting together sabbatical programming for women in the executive space, for women who are burnt out and feeling anxiety and have been really fighting the good faith, the good fight of faith within their organizations, really creating, some executive programming to teach them how to have that balance and not feel so burnt out. I think that's also contributing to the great resignation that people just feel overwhelmed with the work that's before them and they don't know how to have techniques that can kind of bring that balance. And so that leadership capacity of teaching how to restore oneself and avoid executive burnout is something that we're looking at solving for in Q4 as well as Q1 of 2023.
Burnout is unfortunately still very present, and it needs to be really intentionally thought about in order to prevent it in a proactive way, and really ask yourself those kind of self-reflection questions too, to see if you are burned out and you're feeling that as well. I think,
Yes.
one of the parts that of the employee or candidate experience as well is when you first start at an organization, you might want to boil the ocean. You feel like there's so much information and you want to make an impact right away. How can
Yeah.
companies really think about making their onboarding process more equitable?
Absolutely. I think that it really begins with the inclusive leadership mindset. And knowing that when someone comes into an organization, it is really incumbent upon the leadership to create that environment where everybody feels safe, everybody feels that they can contribute, everyone, kind of embraces innovation without the fear to fail. I remember coming on board in an organization, and when I arrived on my first day, after much vetting, I was given a seat number, Christina, and I went up to the third floor and I was just like looking for the seat number. No one asked me, can they help me? No one asked, who are you looking for? Absolutely nothing. So when I reached the row where the numbers aligned with the piece of paper that I was given at the front door, I remember just kind of walking down this long aisle, looking to the left and to the right for my seat number, and absolutely no one turned around to greet me. No one turned around. And so it was the longest first and last day of my career. Absolutely, because that was a culture that I was like, wow, no one turned around. And then my leader hadn't even come to me for the first day, nor sent a delegate to come and welcome me into that culture. So I think that inclusive leadership, the commitment toward inclusive leadership is really critical to success.
Absolutely. I mean, that is not an inclusive kind of onboarding experience the first day. And it definitely says a lot when you're setting the stage and this is your first day at an organization as well. People really,
Absolutely.
yeah, and be intentional around welcoming folks into the company, onto the team. When we talk about inclusive leadership, I want to ask how companies and leaders can really think about operationalizing equity-driven leadership and having those non-negotiables as well.
Indeed, indeed. I think it's really important that companies just know the difference between diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity is really recognizing that each one of us are different. And inclusion is about making room for each one of those differences. Equity, making sure that we have a level playing field and everybody has the same opportunities. And so when we talk about equity-driven leadership, again, I just think it's really incumbent upon the organization as a whole to commit in full to each one of those pillars: diversity, equity, and inclusion, making room for employees to have a voice or to have a say, creating those inclusive environments where, again, people feel safe and they feel valued. So I think leaders have to really ask themselves, how deeply do I know the members of my team? And if you don't have that, that level of understanding or that level of relationship, then take the time to really find out what's important to those members of your team as well. How can you increase your understanding of that particular person, what their needs are, so that you can provide it as a leader?
I think that is really good advice and also questions to ask yourself as well. How well do I know my team? How in tune am I with how they're feeling? Am I creating that psychological safety so people feel like they can trust me as well, like any other relationship?
Absolutely.
In terms of feeling safe and valued at a company, we know this doesn't just happen because you will it to, or you have a great intention. It really takes intentional action, and people want to know when they are moving the needle or if they need to change something about it. What kind of metrics should we look to in order to measure the progress of creating a really equitable workplace, knowing that it's a continuous journey and we're not looking to check a box?
I love that question. There are measurements all around us. And so in the informal sense, there are measurements when you have your one-to-ones with employees and really checking in, not just having a conversation. So what did you get accomplished today? Check the box, check the box. But how are you feeling? Are you connected to the culture? So there's all kind of ways to do that. One of the greatest leaders that I've ever had, his name was Brian. And Brian took pulse surveys every single day that he was in the workplace. I think he spent about 80% of his time outside of his office and on the floor with his people. And in doing that, he was really just kind of not only taking metrics, but he was also driving metrics in a positive way, because Brian would visit every tier of his organization, from the top of the house, us as operations managers running teams of 300 people, all the way down to someone who didn't have any direct reports or even in the mailroom. And Brian would simply say, "Hey, Christine, how are you doing today? What's working right? What's not working for you today? And how can we improve that?" I mean, those simple questions gave him so much insight into the organization. And guess what? When something was about to break, Brian knew that was about to break, because by doing that, he created trust. He created an environment where a real open door policy existed. It wasn't just something that was said. And so with that, those types of informal metrics are invaluable. You have to have an open door. You have to talk to people, because outside of the statistical questions and the statistical numbers that we look at, oftentimes the open commentary is going to tell you the true story. So for the formal metrics, we can talk about the Net Promoter Score, right? So we definitely measure Net Promoter Scores. Some people look at it in terms of the Employee Pulse Survey, the Employee Satisfaction Survey. All of those metrics are really critical. And then you look at the demographics across your organization. What do the levels look like? Where are the promotions being made? And is everybody having the same access to those promotions? Also, too, what are the demographic makeups of your organization? How many females do you have? How many, transgenders do you have? How many males do you have? And how are their career trajectories really moving ahead, right? So when you look at historical data, and you really start to pivot into, or start to drill down into a lot of the nuances of what data can actually tell us, you'll start to see trends which should drive the actions of your business. Promotions, advancement, tenure, equal pay, all of these are metrics that can really help us to understand how to drive a more inclusive and a more effective culture. So I can't say enough, again, about that one-to-one time, though. That's what's really going to tell the stories, outside of the surveys and the metrics that you might take every 3, 6, 9 months, some only annually if they take it at all. But the real story comes when you have that one-to-one relationship with your team members and your staff, and they feel comfortable enough in coming to you to say something's not working, or this is really working well. So how can we do more of that?
Yeah, the quantitative data is important, but also the qualitative as well. We remember people like Brian who ask questions, meaningful questions, and actually wait for your authentic answer. They actively listen. Continue to build trust as well, which definitely takes time there too. How do you see that culture of trust and really active listening manifesting at thriving organizations overall?
Yeah. So I think cultures have to be proactive in creating spaces for people to share. One of my favorites that I've implemented from the onboarding of a new employee all the way through the tenure of their entire career is listening circles. They are so very cool, because they are environments where you go into a space with senior leaders and you can actually just kind of share. And the ground rules are no judgment, right? No retaliation. Just listen. Listen to what's kind of going right, what's going wrong, or how an employee feels. It can be very positive, right? But if it's negative, then take it for what it is and take what you can to make the environment better. Another great way to build that trust is a let's talk. And let's talk, so how I like to do them is to invite people anonymously. So when you're invited to a let's talk, maybe once a quarter, you will walk into a space that is, nicely lit. You'll have some snacks, maybe a nice gourmet lunch. You'll have refreshments, a little bit of music playing in the background. And the the idea is that you never know who's going to be in the room. So you can walk into a let's talk and it can be, executive leader from a department, another department. It might be the executive leader that you've been trying to get on their calendar for the last, 5 months. But the thing is that you never know who's in the room. And the Let's Talk gives an opportunity to leave the titles outside of the door, come on in and let's have some real conversation about a relevant business problem and let's solve it from each level. So that'll give you a chance to lead leaders. It'll give you a chance to have your voice heard. And again, we have ground rules of no judgment, no idea is a dumb idea, all of these things that make it a safe environment. And so how that builds trust is that outside of that environment, now you have a new circle of influence, right? Say you really solved and gave a great idea. That senior leader is going to remember that. And the next time it comes around to having conversations, you see them in the hall, then it's hi, Christine, or hi, Donna, instead of just hello, good day. So these types of environments allow for sharing and it allows for an expansion of reach, I think, for the employees, thereby building trust.
Yeah, I think those are really good examples of just creating a really intentional space to listen and learn from one another and create that trust. I think
Absolutely.
You're implementing this for the first time at your organization or you're testing new things, people are bound to make mistakes, and that's okay as long as you learn from them and take that moving forward. Are there any
Absolutely.
you see other companies making in their inclusion strategy, of course, without naming any specific names?
Some of the common mistakes that I see, even in doing consulting work, and having been in dialogue with a lot of people in the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 space, even entrepreneurs, a common mistake is non-commitment. So what does that look like? It looks like, yes, we're gung-ho and we're rah-rah about, diversity, equity, and inclusion or inclusive leadership. However, after a month or so, we're not so gung-ho about it. We're refocus our energies on other business priorities. But in order for it to really be a part of the culture, it has to be a long-term commitment. It's a long game. So every employee who comes into your organization should have the opportunity to feel your greatest effort toward diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, every single leader. So that non-commitment at every level might be one of the biggest mistakes that organizations are making.
Thank you for sharing that as well. You really need to have a true commitment to this work. It really can't be surface level. There needs to be teeth and action behind kind of the statements and the public or internal commitment you're making as well. On the flip side, is there a positive kind of pattern you're seeing that you're really excited for folks to be including in their workplace strategies in regards to leadership or diversity, equity, inclusion, or people, talent, culture in general?
Absolutely. So I think I'm really, really excited to see the evolution of or the progression of really addressing unconscious bias in the workplace. I think it's really critical because oftentimes we do have these unconscious biases. And what I'm seeing is a real effort for organizations to start to peel back the onion of what that looks like and really bring forth the intrinsic value of contributions by everyone in the organization and really highlighting how that can positively affect the bottom line. And so I am seeing a lot of workplace training initiatives. I'm even getting tapped on to come into a lot of organizations to talk about unconscious bias. And it can be a lot of fun. It can be a little bit scary at first, but once you set the tone to really start to address some unconscious biases that we all carry. One of the examples that I do give is that, in going into a room and stepping before a mic, you have about 4 to 7 seconds before people have already made all kind of judgments about you. Is she smart? Does she dress well? What kind of school did she go to? What was the background? He or she, what background? And I tell my audiences, don't be put off by it. We all do it. unconsciously we do it. And so we have to look and ask ourselves the question of why we're doing it. And so once we are able to address that, we're able to then change our outlook or change the way that we view situations, people, and things. And so that's one thing I'm really excited to see organizations really starting to address unconscious bias.
Absolutely. You have to acknowledge it, also kind of understand that it is something that a lot of folks kind of think of as well, and then say, okay, how am I going to move forward? How am I going to kind of think about this in the future as well? What's the action I'm going to take moving
Yeah.
forward? Donna, is there anything that I didn't specifically ask you that you would like to share with our audience, or underscoring any key takeaways from our conversation today that you hope people bring with them?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you. This was so much fun. It was great. Thank you so much. The one thing that I always tell my audiences and I tell my employees, I specialize in building high performance teams. And one of the things that I really drive is to stay curious. Stay curious, ask questions, and hold your leaders accountable from your own level. If your leader says that there is an initiative that they are backing, make sure that they are, walking the walk and talking the talk. You have every right to do that. So as we stay innovative and we stay curious and we continue to ask questions, we all can grow. And so that's something that I think is really critical. I'd like for people to remember that in their daily work. Stay curious, stay hungry.
Stay curious, stay hungry. Donna, I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.